Cole Sprout, welcome back to the Running Effect podcast. This has to be edition 3 or 4 at this point. Always a privilege and pleasure talking to you. How are you doing this afternoon?
Oh, I'm doing well this afternoon. Yeah, had a little macchiato this morning, caffeine in the veins, so I'm fired up.
He's ready to spit some fire, ready to spit some wisdom. Cole, the last time we talked was a semi-podcast that the audience of 20 there only knows about. So I think we should fill in the listener. On my drive home from my track workout, I was reminded of this. So we kind of did this like live in podcast thing at US Champs last year
Mm,
with Hoka, and it was like a live trivia thing. Dude, we were on fire. I think
mm.
we need to enlighten the listener on the duo that Cole Sprout and Dominic Schluter are. Can you tell the people what went down if you remember? I think we only got
Oh,
one answer wrong of like the 10.
yeah, I don't remember the specific questions, but I feel like we were just really good at guessing. I don't think we ever knew the answer off the top of our heads, but we somehow guessed correctly like 8 times out of 10. It was something crazy. I remember like not really knowing, and you're like kind of like, oh, I think it's this, and I'm like, yeah, let's go with that. And it ended up being right like 5 different times. I've never seen anything like that. It was a generational run, but it was incredible.
Hey, I'll
Because
I'll
like
be like I'll say I knew the answers just to gas myself up.
right, no, I mean you were definitely carrying though. You have there was some really niche historical running questions. Like I'm trying to think of what
They pulled some
year.
stuff from they pulled some crazy answers.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
in
like from the
2004, who made the 1500 team from Hoka? It's like,
yeah,
how are we
exactly.
supposed to
Oh
know
yeah,
that?
exactly. There was a few like that. And I don't know, you were doing really well. It was kind of impressive.
It was funny
Yeah.
how that thing got brought together because I think they decided to do that like a few days before. And then there was a conversation about bringing Leo Manzano with two black runners
Mm,
who was we were triviaing against, if that's
hmm.
the correct terminology. And so they were like, if you know anyone who's running this weekend and would come do this, let us know. And so first
Hmm.
person the contact I thought of was Cole Sprout. Texted you, was like, "Hey, would you be
Oh,
willing to show up to this little live trivia podcast thing?" You're like, "Yeah, I'm down," and
oh
the
yeah.
rest is history. So we talked about that afterward. I think it would be so much fun to do on like a larger scale with more professional
Mm.
athletes and stuff. I think doing those
Oh, it would
events in
be.
general is a lot of fun and connects you to the audience and the sport of running a lot more.
Oh, it does. And I feel like so many people within the running community, most people know a lot, especially at the professional level. Athletes know so much about the history of the sport just because it's so tightly knit. I think because it's yeah so relational, and there's it's just like a different camaraderie that you have, so people just know so much more. um I don't know, so it's yeah, that would be cool though, like a big scale trivia thing. We've got to do that.
In relation to reflecting on this conversation this morning, kind of preparation of just like thinking about it, nothing too deep. I was
Mm,
reminded of this time of year. We're slowly venturing into late May, early June. And I was thinking about your high school years where you were so dominant in the sport.
mm,
And I was thinking about that senior year track season where I think coming up soon is the 4-year anniversary of what y'all called the Quarantine Classico. Take
mm,
me through that race and how weird is it to think that that was 4 years ago at this point and
mm.
just how much time
Yeah,
flies
that is
by.
weird. Yeah, it doesn't feel that long ago for sure. I think college has yeah gone by so much faster than any of the past 4 years I've lived. And I think that's true as you get older, just in general. But yeah, I mean that was a really cool opportunity because all of us who ended up doing that hadn't raced. Maybe we got like one race in early season, but yeah, we just been working out, time trialing a little bit up to that point. And so you know, a few of us who were um, friends and similar fitness were and trying to achieve the same goal of going sub 4 were just I don't know how it started to happen. I think Matt uh, reached out initially and was trying to organize something, and so yeah, it was Matt, Leo, Dashbaugh, Easton, Allred, and I, and oh Thomas, my current teammate, roommate now. we kind of all headed down there, and with the goal of running a sub 4 mile. And yeah, I mean, it was a really cool setup. You know, it was very low key. Obviously, there's like nobody watching, no crowd, so it was a little weird, just relative to what a racing experience traditionally is like. So a little bit of a different atmosphere, but I think after we'd all been time trialing and doing a lot of solo stuff, it didn't feel as weird. Um, but yeah, we had a few guys who offered to come pace and took us out a little. I think yeah, around like two flat, 201, 202 through the 800 or so. Um, so it was like a little bit on the slow side, perhaps, but I think that worked well for Leo, especially. He has wheels, um, and so we came through 1200 probably. I don't know, 301, 302 maybe, because he probably closed in the 50, 57 or so. But yeah, Leo took off. I was behind him. Didn't have those types of wheels though, so I was kind of like trying to just hang on. I think Thomas took it after the 800 and was trying to make something happen, because we were lagging a little bit on the pace. So he took it for that third lap, and then Leo and I went around the outside, probably on the back stretch. And at that point, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not really picking the pace up from here. I'm just trying to hold on." So I was just trying not to walk it in. And Leo was, yeah, he dipped under four, ran 359 something, which obviously was electric. You know, it's not very common that one you high schooler run sub four. At least I think it's getting more and more common, but still, you know, it's a pretty insane achievement. And then to be in a race where that happens, is also just like the proximity of it was a really cool moment to share that with him. And then I ran a 4:02, I think. So pretty good effort. You know, it was, I think for how the race was set up and how he ran it, it was about the best I could do. I think I was a little bit more strength oriented. I think if it was a little bit more even towards the beginning, that could have helped me. Um, but unfortunately, I'm not dropping that 55. So,
I think the same
um,
goes for many of the guys in the field,
yeah.
but specifically you progressed so well in high school. You're too
Hmm.
humble. I don't think you'd say this, but I can say this as a fan of the sport. Like it was kind of inevitable that you were going to break for your senior year had you had the
Hmm.
normal opportunities that a kid would have. Was it difficult in the moment, and is it difficult looking back on it that you didn't get the opportunities that probably would have inevitably led to a sub four? Again, you'll never know, but I
Hmm.
think people, if they follow your progression, it's like, well, that 402 probably would have been like some mid-season race in Colorado, you know?
Hmm.
And now you look at
Yeah.
like the meets like Festival of Miles where, you know, you have Eric Sawinski pacing a boys mile. Not saying you would have had that opportunity, but stuff like that comes together. Magic aligns. It's hard to have all the stars line up on one night like you guys did in
Oh, it is
California. Is it tough looking
totally.
back on it, or is it just like, nah, it's just unfortunate with COVID and life goes on? It's not a big deal to
Yeah.
break for.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was definitely tough to not have as many opportunities to chase after that goal. Because yeah, being that close and not quite getting it, it was bittersweet. Um, but at the same time, I was a senior in high school and I was about to move on to college running, and so I think I was more excited about that opportunity of what college running would look like than I was disappointed with. Oh, you know, I wasn't. It wasn't quite the race it could have been. You know, the stars didn't quite align, um, because, like I said, you know, it was still, I think, a good effort and a good race, just given the circumstances. And I mean, context is pretty big. I think if you're just measuring objectively, like, oh, I didn't hit the goal, I didn't hit the time, you know, it was a bad race. Like context is very very important. And I think even at that point, like it didn't really bother me too much, just given what was on the horizon. So, um, yeah, I think I knew it was inevitable, even if it wasn't going to happen that senior year. Um, I felt confident that that was a great momentum going into college. So,
I may have shared this quote with you on previous podcasts because I think who you are as a person and how you talk is very much philosophical. And so in our previous discussions, I feel like
mm,
I've quote dropped so much on you. So I may have shared this one before, but I'll share it again, even if I have, just in relation to what we're talking about reflecting on the past, et cetera, and kind of looking
mm,
towards the future. One of my favorite quotes, probably my favorite quote in relation to the past, is a quote that goes, "The past is a place of reference, not a place of residence." What's your take on
mm,
that quote? And I think specifically, you probably feel this when you go home and you see like old high school teammates or high school friends. I feel like your age are the type of people, your age and like 60-year-olds love reflecting on high school, like the glory days. Why do you think
the
people
glory
find it
days.
so hard to be in the present moment and focus on where they're at instead of like being like, oh, if I didn't get injured, I would have run so and so time, or like, oh, my best days were in high school,
Mm,
rather than like living where their feet are and focusing on how they can make their present reality better.
mm, yeah. Oh, yeah. And two, I mean, I guess things tend to get philosophical because I think my faith informs how I think about things too. Like what is the end goal? Like what am I really trying to achieve and perfect in this lifetime generally, but even in my present moment, like what is the goal of my actions? And you can't once you die, like you're not taking that sub four with you, right? So there's like I don't know. Well, I think every moment that you get to experience and get to live in and have shape you is shaping that um, the spirit within you. The character that you develop. I think everything isn't like inherently, like a bad or good moment. Obviously, you create these goals for yourself, but I think they will be fruitless or empty if they're not aligned with um, some greater goal of character building. I think when you view like every experience you live, whether it's good or bad, through like, okay, well, how did I become a better person of it? How can I love people better? How can I be a better friend, better teammate, so on, so forth. It Things look a little bit less bleak, or at least like the bad times look a little uh, more hopeful for how maybe that will make you a little bit more resilient in the future. So I don't know. That was I didn't mean to take it that deep, but
That's good,
um,
man. I
yeah.
have something good to respond with that will only have us go deeper, but I love my podcasting
Oh
conversations with
yeah.
you, so it's
No,
awesome.
let's do it. Yeah.
And I've actually specifically withheld this. I was gonna post this on my story with a response, and I didn't. And I wasn't ever planning on bringing this up on a podcast, but I think you're someone good to bring this up with because I am curious to not just hear your like insights, but also advice because you're one of the guests in the history of the podcast that's like super outspoken about their faith. And I'm kind of curious. I guess I'll ask you a question before reading what I'm about to read. Like,
Hmm.
I'm curious to hear how you step into that uncomfortableness of bringing your faith into something that's not explicitly faith, which we would call your running.
Hmm.
Because I was going through reviews on Apple Podcasts and I got this review. I still got a four out of 5 star review, so it wasn't horrible. And this kid
Hmm.
said, he said, I listened to this podcast much of 2023 and into 2024. Most of the content is interesting, and I like the interview style and the fact that he actively gets relevant runners to talk about the sport. Here's why I'm bringing this up. The only real negative that finally got me to stop listening is that he consistently uses religious phrasing mixed into the commentary. It's fine to
Hmm.
have religious beliefs, but they don't belong in a running podcast.
Hmm.
I want to hear from you because I think you're a great example of someone who leans into their faith. Has that been difficult? And why? I mean, I know why, but why are you so passionate to the point of letting it, you know, creep into other aspects of your life, like running?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great question. I mean, even within my environment here, It's a very secular school, university, and I have a lot of teammates who don't share the same beliefs as I do. And that's a point of discussion that we talk about. Like, at what point are you doing too much talking about your faith? Some guys will. I said, like, there's a time and place, there's a context um, for sharing something like that, and I wouldn't even necessarily disagree. I think within talking about your faith, Christianity, just in broad strokes, can be a little impersonal if you're just kind of dumping it on everything that you talk about. And so I would agree that, yeah, you have to approach it with a personal touch. Like, it's not just something you say to say, but there has to be some genuine intention behind it. Like, that is the whole point. Like, it's about relationship. It's about communication, and it's about, like, seeing another person and trying to understand and respect and love them for who they are. Um, and so, yeah, when you're throwing around just random religious terminology, like,
Right.
that's not showing somebody how much you love them, or what what it's really about. I think that can be, it can just feel impersonal, and it can devalue the point you're trying to make, or it can devalue religion as a whole if you're not walking the talk. And that, I mean, that's this tricky part, right? Like, how do you, and when I talk to people, that's a big um, drawback, I guess, or turnoff, is the fact that Christians, people who claim they believe in the Bible, are also twisted people, and they contradict themselves all the time. And why would I believe something where that's, like, this group of people are so contradictory to their beliefs? And I think that's the tricky part, right? Because, I mean, I think my faith has become more central and more important to me because, um, I mean, yeah, for one, like, it's the I've tried living life according to what society, culture values, and it feels empty. There's moments where I try one thing and I look back and I'm like, huh, like, I should have just not have done that. And then, I look at what the word says, what the Bible says, and it says that in there. So sometimes, like, that experience is necessary to maybe realize the truth behind words. But yeah, I lost my train of thought a little bit on, like, what I was
I
gonna.
mean, you said a lot of good stuff there, so
Yeah, yeah. No,
I
I'll
mean,
try to
what I
get back
would
to that. There was something I
what
was gonna add on about, but yeah,
I mean,
I
I
mean,
think
I
that was
guess, yeah,
good.
like, you know, it's important to be using. I don't know. It's not like a box you check when you're talking about, when you're trying to assert your faith, and I think it's very easy to do that. It takes a lot of intentionality and a lot of personability. It takes knowing somebody, even. I think that's why it's hard to use a platform like social media and make your faith seem genuine, because it's just, at the end of the day, it's like your highlight reel. It just
Right.
feels, I think it's hard to feel a genuine connection with somebody over something like Instagram, right? So it's hard to make it feel real.
Mhm.
But I guess I knew what I was going to say. Like, the contradictory aspect, where a lot of people turn away from maybe the church, or the idea of religion, because there's so much contradiction in how people live versus what they say they believe. And that's like the sticky situation, right? Like, everybody, for myself, like, I pursue my faith because I know my natural tendencies aren't good. If I were left up to my own devices, I would lead myself down a destructive path, and a path that wasn't fulfilling in the long term. And like I said, I've tried living by the world, and I just didn't find the fruit in that. Felt empty. I think that everybody is searching for that purpose in a sense. Um, but I'm everybody's liable to be imperfect. So I think it's hard to differentiate the imperfect people from a perfect faith, because we're trying to. I think no matter what we do, we're gonna corrupt something that's pure, which is like a little um, negative. But I think when you differentiate the two, or maybe shift that mindset, it becomes a little bit more understandable. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah, totally. What's funny about that review too is maybe it's more of a challenge for me to honestly speak more openly
Oh,
about my faith, because I only speak about it
yeah.
in the context of having guests like you or like your
Mm,
old teammate like Ashley, where I know faith is core to who they are and their story, that it makes
mm,
sense for them to bring it up and for me to bring it
totally.
out of them, because it's a platform for the guest ultimately. And so if
Mm,
faith is core to who Cole Sprout is, why would I not bring it up in the context of Cole Sprout? But the vast majority of my podcast, it doesn't even get brought up. And sometimes I think back and I'm like, man, I wish I weaved my faith
mm,
more into it. But if
yeah.
anything, that review was like, oh, I guess I'm doing something right then. I mean, it's
Yeah, I know.
it's tough that obviously you don't naturally as a human you don't want to see a negative comment, but it's also encouraging in the sense of, oh, okay, well, if he's saying that, I must speak about the faith enough, and that's a good thing.
Mm,
And a big I know different denominations believe different things, but I heard someone say this once and it was incredibly impactful for me. They said, like, one day we won't be judged by just our actions, but also by our inactions.
mm,
And the
mm,
analogy I heard was, when we get to judgment day one day, the amount of people who are in our lives or in our past life who said, you knew all this truth and yet you
mm,
never gave me the time of day to share that this was how things were going to go down, yet you knew and you didn't share it with me. I was like,
mm,
dang. And so now with
mhm.
like a platform, I almost, again, most of my stuff isn't faith based, otherwise I'd have a faith podcast. But for me, I do feel a sense of responsibility to, I mean, like, you can speak to this, the fulfillment that comes from being in relationship with Jesus is greater than any race you've ever ran. I can almost guarantee
Mm,
it. And
mhm,
so I feel like and for me, it's the same thing. Like any amount of brand deal or social media followers or anything like pales in comparison. It's all fleeting. Like I'm happy for a day, maybe,
mm.
and then it's on to the next thing because it's of this world. And so I don't know. For me, I feel a sense of responsibility to share that with people. Um,
Yeah,
I don't
it
know.
can be
Would you agree
strengthening
with
to.
me on the
I would agree
fulfillment
with you.
piece?
Yeah, yeah, and it is strengthening to have discourse, to talk to somebody who doesn't share the same faith and understand why they don't, just as much as why you believe something. I think it's super cool to talk with people who, even if they were a Christian at one point, they don't really feel that way anymore, or they have an entirely different belief system and never have had a proximity to the church. So, um, yeah, it's. I'm trying to be better about that too. Like it's so easy to just, section that piece of your life into, you talk with other Christian people when like they believe the same thing as you, but it's a totally different ball game trying to just broach that subject to anybody. So, and if you don't really know, I don't know, it can be a little taboo feeling, because you don't want to step on toes, but at the same time, yeah, you want to you want everybody to have the same fulfillment in life as you feel, and know that truth. So it's
Right.
a tricky one,
I
isn't
know.
it?
I think the other thing too that Christians do a poor job of generally is they how do I want to say this? Because I don't want to put a blanket on Christians generally, but I think a
Mm,
lot of us like feel the need to like share the gospel and very explicitly talk about like the life of Jesus and stuff, but don't
mhm.
necessarily embody normal virtues that lead people closer to Christ. Like
Oh,
literally
so true.
just being a loving, kind, joyful person and putting a smile on someone's face or opening the door for a stranger, like living out the
Mm,
values that Jesus lived on his time on earth a lot of times has a bigger impact and leads that person closer to encounter with Jesus that day than like, hey, read what John said in the gospel. You know what I mean? So
right,
that's
yeah,
something I'm trying to work on too is like
yeah.
embodying like love, joy, peace, all of those things that are virtues of a Christian life. And how can I
Mm,
lead those in my life closer to Christ through embodying those things, not just being like, oh, here's my faith, here's why I believe it's right.
mm.
Here's why you should too, type thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the whole thing. If you see somebody who's miserable but professes this faith, this religion, and how it's so fantastic, but you don't see that truth in that person's life, them living it out, or it being a positive influence in their life, then why would you ever believe that? Why would you ever want to join them if they're miserable? But if you see somebody who just has such a positive outlook, is always comforting, putting others first, like that's a very attractive personality. Um, and yeah, it's so that I totally struggle with talking about my faith, and then my actions don't really back that up. Like that's yeah. I mean, it's like I was saying earlier. That's the biggest. It's the hardest thing to do because it is contradictory to be saying one thing and doing another, because your actions are ultimately the most influential thing in not even changing somebody's mind, but showing somebody like that's the best demonstration of what it is that we're about, right? Because you can say all you want, but if your actions don't back it up, then you know, and that there's so many verses about that. A faith without action is dead. Um, that's pretty much the heart of a lot of what the gospel is about. So yeah, I'm always trying to be better about that because it's tough.
For sure, for sure. Connecting this to something you spoke to a little bit earlier, but bringing it up again to go deeper on it.
Mm,
You mentioned kind of your faith in relation to some of the setbacks you've experienced and having something more to ground you in those time periods. Specifically speaking on like the last year or two where you have had setbacks, can you speak to the role of your faith and compare that, not naming people, but I've had guests on the podcast or just like people in my life that I know where their God is running and their full identity is placed in running. That then when they get injured or a race doesn't go their way because it's their full identity, their whole world comes crashing down because it is their whole world. So if they have
mm,
a setback in that because it's their whole world, they don't have something to ground them. For you, I've always been impressed and admired you in the fact that, yes, you care about running so much, probably one of your favorite things in the world, if not your favorite thing in the world, but you do have something greater to ground you. And I think that's why you've been able to come out on the other side in a very healthy and sustainable way.
mm. Oh yeah, no, it's hard for something that you do hours a day, 7 days a week, 365, 350 days out of the year to not become a god in your life, an idol. Like when you just spend that much time and energy, you have to care a lot. And I've struggled a lot with trying to still be a good athlete and commit myself to what is required while also making sure it doesn't become an idol. It's very super tough to try and keep keep proper perspective. But I think for one, as I have had to face setbacks um, and whatever else, it it forces a bit of a reality or a mindset change, or at least a perspective shift. Um, it's easy when things are going well Like that's in high school for sure. Running was an idol because it was giving me everything I wanted and needed. Right, like what I just had kind of showed up and did my thing, and things are going well. And so when things are going well, what's the point of having a faith? You know. Um, and so it wasn't really until I had setback or whatever else, and had to really look at things differently, reevaluate, that I was like, wow, I've been kind of just living with my head in the sand a little bit, um, not intentionally, but it's just so easy to do when things are going well. You can kind of just narrow your focus to what you're doing, and not really think about much else. But yeah, when I was forced to have a little bit of a reality shift, there was areas of my life that I wasn't growing and nourishing the way I wish I was. Relationships, and I mean, yeah, relationships. I think I was devoting so much time to one thing that I wasn't being the son, brother, friend, teammate that I am called to be within my faith. So that was convicting for me, and so yeah, I think that ties back to what I was saying in how you weigh different experiences and different setbacks. Because if I'm positioning myself to prioritize how I can be a better person, how I can be a not even a better person, that's very general. How can I be a better brother, son, friend? Then I don't know, the setbacks seem a lot more appealing, because they are, like, sometimes you really do need and even want those reevaluation points, because yeah, it's just very easy to, when things are going well for a long time, to not it's very easy to lose focus of change, or to want change. I think it's very natural to just like the homeostasis you're in. Things are easy, you want things to be easy. That's like natural, your natural tendency, evolutionarily. Like that's what every animal, even humans, want. So there's a tendency to want to just float along, not really worry about changing or growing, because that does take energy and it takes effort and it's hard. Um, but setbacks force you to not even grow, but to get back to where you once were, maybe. Because say you were performing at a level consistently for a while, and setback occurs, you're down at this level now, and it's not even about like growing per se, but it's like you just realize that you now have to do something else, exert energy to get back to where you once were. um, and once you kind of have to like really see the effort required to get to this point, um, it's healthy to then want to be like, okay, well, I'm like, let's keep going. Like I kind of know how I can be better. I know how I can bounce back and be more resilient. I think you need that to long term have a consistent skill, or yeah, skill of resilience, or even confidence in your resilience. So I think that's probably one of the biggest advantages, or the biggest blessings that I've been given in facing adversity, is just through my running. Is like, for one, it's differentiated my purpose from purely running, because that was everything for a long time. So I think I'm able to a little bit more clearly see how I can integrate this in my life while growing, changing, and improving the other areas of my life that are I've claimed to be important, but haven't really been putting the work to the actions. My actions haven't really reflected that. Um, so yeah, I think it's good. Um, yeah, I think in a way that's something I've always prayed for, wisdom and revelation. Every time I open up the Bible or like pray or something, or even like before a race, I was taught this like phrase of wisdom and revelation. This was just like one of the teachers I had at middle school, maybe. And he was like, every time you're about to position yourself or like shift your mindset into reading the word of God or something, or um, intentionally try to be present or pray or do something, like you can say these words as like as a an act of just like something intentional you're doing to shift focus. So it's just like a condition, you're like conditioning yourself to change your focus from whatever you were doing to what you're doing now. And so I've always said those words, and I don't think maybe I knew what praying for that actually meant, because to gain any wisdom or to gain any insight into yourself or into other people is is not an easy ask. It requires a lot of change and setback. Um, but I think it's good.
Throughout the past year of ups and downs that you've experienced, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned? 2024, but also 2023.
2024. I guess for one, I mean, I guess it's kind of tied. Like I've, for one, had to be more intentional about what what running looks like in my life, um, and especially as I'm coming to the end of college and life is about to look different. Um, I've had to really wrestle with what what is important to me and what it is that I want to do with the gifts that I've been given. So I guess even in this lull of performance I've been experiencing, I have been able to. It's given me opportunities to, for one, like I wouldn't have necessarily applied to the computer science master's program that I am going to do next year if I hadn't, if I was running really well and the prospects of running professionally were a guarantee and the money would be good, I wouldn't have wanted to do that. So I think in one sense, even in recent history, like this past year, I've been given that opportunity. Um, so I guess something that I've learned from that is I guess how broad your gifts can be, or I've learned about gifts that I never knew I had. Um, I think I've maybe I narrowed myself to running for a long time, like as in that's kind of my purpose and that's what I'll do for a really long time. Um, and yeah, there's something refreshing about a new challenge of like, I've been given this opportunity, how can I kindle this part of myself that like I always enjoyed school and um, liked to learn generally. Like I like to learn, but I never really thought of myself as somebody who could, I don't know, who could really be somebody um, that excelled in the classroom. Like, especially at a place like Stanford, I don't I oftentimes feel like I don't belong in the the classrooms and with the people that I'm around. There's just a very high bar, high expectation, and I think as I've just put myself out there a little bit more and seen that I've been able to like learn and do well in the classroom, like that's kind of given me this sense of confidence in, okay, maybe I'm actually good at um, just putting my head down, working. Generally speaking, that's obviously been very applicative to distance running. It's just putting in reps, consistency over everything, and I think it's cool to see how that applies to other areas of my life. I think I knew that that was the case, that it was a generally applicative skill set, but I'd never really gotten to test that out. So it's kind of cool to see just like how the different skills I've learned over the course of my life up to this point now apply to other areas of my life. Um, so I don't know. That's kind of like it's not like a,
It's a good lesson
succinct
right there.
lesson, but like that's been my experience over the past year or so. Um,
Something
yeah.
I'm curious to hear about, and I think the listeners are as well. Take me through the state of Cole Sprout as it relates to the NCAA. Let's
Mm,
talk eligibility, your kind of
yeah.
plan before graduating, and some ambitions before you walk away from the
Mm,
Stanford kit.
mm. Yeah. So I have a year of NCAA eligibility left, fall, winter, spring next year. So because I'm doing my 1 year program next year, I'm going to come back and just use up all the eligibility I have left. And that was the reasoning for redshirting the spring season. Was that I was getting to a pretty good place in terms of fitness and consistency, but I still felt like it would be worth training through this period, giving myself a bit of a reset, even from the NCAA circuit, to to just put my head down and get some good work in so that I can really make the most out of the spring eligibility I have left. And yeah, I mean that's the goal. Like I just want to see what I can do just by you being consistent as much as I possibly can throughout this year, going into next year, and hopefully seeing some results come out of that. Um, obviously, it has been frustrating because I've been feeling very consistent, hitting workouts and doing X, Y, Z, um, but the progression hasn't been quite as much or as linear as I mean would want. Obviously, like everybody wants a fast progression, but you don't necessarily know how or when that will kind of come into effect, because I've been taught about progression as steps almost, where you put in a lot of work and you don't necessarily get much better over a certain amount of period of time, but then you will see like a spike in performance when your body begins to adjust and adapt to what you've been doing, and the results reflect that. So it's I think it's been refreshing to have to restart in a sense and just like really be intentional about like, all right, I just have to show up and be present, not just show up, but be present in these um, kind of last moments as a Stanford athlete. I think I've gotten tempted to go through the motions um, through something that, I mean, running is so it can be very monotonous and very repetitive, and it's so easy to go through the motions when that's the case. So, given that I'm coming up on a year to go, or at least I thought this might be my last year at certain points, I really wanted to be intentional about being present and just loving every moment for what it is and for the fact that they're fleeting. Um, and I've applied that too, just like the team as a whole, how I interact with guys and how present I am with the team. I think that's also a huge motivating factor or goal of mine with the last for this last year is being the best teammate I can be, being as present as possible, being as supportive and as encouraging as I can, and yeah, hopefully being somebody who can uplift and make the people around me better. Um, because with training taking up so much time, it can be easy to become very individualized. Um, I think you do need some of that, but at the same time, it's a team. There's still a team dynamic, and if if we want to do something cool as a team, do something meaningful, we have to create that culture of wanting to do it for one another. I think we have to trust each other to a very high level that we're all on the same page, all of our goals are aligned, and we all trust each other that we're here for the right reasons. So yeah, even apart from the individual aspect, like I want to definitely tap into the team side of things, which in high school wasn't much of a factor, and at least like I didn't pour a lot of myself into that, but I want to be better about that. So yeah, I again individually want to be consistent, be present, and just soak up every moment, appreciating even if there's setbacks in this next year, like appreciating the fact that I'm able to be here, got the Stanford kit on, and soaking it in. But yeah.
I think your freshman year, it was either freshman year or sophomore year because you had, NCAA was weird with COVID. You and
Mm.
Charles, I think, placed high teens at the NCAA cross meet. And then I think your sophomore year spring, you placed fourth in the 10K. And again, you were so good in high school. You were probably top two recruit with you and Nico. I think undoubtedly we're probably the top two guys coming out of high school. Do you think that's been hard in retrospect? Like how
Mm.
well you kind of knocked it out of the park,
Yeah, right.
coming into college. Do you feel like that set such a high bar that's been hard to live up to? And how do you kind of
Mm.
manage those feelings if they creep up at all of trying to
Oh,
be in the present moment and focus on what you're doing, but also, as a human being, I'm sure those inclinations come up of like, man, I placed fourth as a sophomore. Like, why am I not
mm.
seeing progress? Why am I not racing better?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, that's a very natural inclination and something I consistently day to day, every time I'm thinking about running, there's the doubt creeping in. Because yeah, for all of high school, it was relatively easy in the sense that I didn't have to go through much setback and adversity to see success. It was just a very consistent progression, and mm, and yeah, it's definitely hard going into college as one of one of the guys who is just assumed to be taking that to the next level and continuing that progression. But I mean, it's hard. It's very hard to be, for one, mentally like refreshed enough to want to continue putting in consistent work without it feeling monotonous or repetitive or draining. Um, Yeah, in a way, setbacks and inconsistency, injury. At first, it was tough because I knew there was an expectation of me, and I had an expectation of myself, and I wasn't meeting either of those. And even not trying to listen to what other people were saying, I still knew what I thought I should be doing. And so yeah, that was tough to navigate and to rationalize. But I think with the past year or two being relatively inconsistent, part of, in a sense, it kind of took some pressure off, because I knew I was still putting my head down. I was doing what I needed to be doing. Um, and even though like the performance was lacking, um, there was still so much joy I found in the process. Like it kind of just reignited the joy that I had for running, and lessened some of the anxiety that I had around the thought of racing and meeting expectations. I think once I was taken out of the limelight, the spotlight, I was able to just be myself and do just go out and race, you know. And obviously, like it's still tough not um, meeting my own internal expectations, knowing that I have placed fourth at NCAAs and done all these things, and it's like not quite clicking to get back to that point. It's super tough. It's super frustrating because it feels like I am doing similar things, but um, yeah, at the same time, it has been a freeing, I would say, to 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 not have as much of an external expectation. I think I'm able to. I think a lot of the internal expectations I built up were as a result of the external expectations that were kind of put on me, and I was, you know, definitely trying to prove that I was what people thought I was.
Hmm.
Um, Without really discovering like what does that look like? Like, is that really what my expectation is? Is that what I want? Um, I've had to. It's been a good opportunity to figure out what that means for me, and if um, and what I want out of the sport and out of these opportunities that I've been given. So yeah, it's tough being somebody who goes from such high expectations, such high consistency that it's not even a question to dropping off the map a little bit. Um, but yeah, you're able to be a little bit more of a real person. It feels like, and that's just like it's a challenge. Like that. That's anybody who has people watching. Like it's hard to not want to lean into what they're saying or what they're expecting out of you, and to not just do that, but to outdo what those expectations are. But you live like that, and it is very draining. You can't like your worth is just so it's like unattainable, you know. Because once you do one thing, you're like, wow, like that's incredible. I wonder if he can do X, Y, Z, and it's just like a never ending cycle of all right, I have to be better. I have to be better. Um, yeah, so it is. It's definitely a hard to differentiate um, the external.
Cole, wrapping up our conversation here. Spill the
Mm.
tea for the listeners. What's on your map?
Mm.
What's on your radar? What are you
What's on the
preparing for?
map?
What are you looking forward to?
Ooh, well, I'm looking forward to. I mean, in the immediate future, I'm just looking forward to this warm weather. We've finally
So
been,
real.
yeah, we've finally gotten out of the rainy season down here in California. So, oh, just days on the days on the field, days in the sun, a little bit of fly fishing, a little bit of hammocking, all that good stuff. I'm excited to be spending some time with the family too. I don't get to see them as much as I'd like. So, um, hoping to be home for at least part of the summer. I think I'll be, let's see, off in Switzerland for a little bit this summer as well, just doing some training, a little bit of job shadowing at On. So that should be a very cool opportunity. Lex Lou and I will be down there. I'm going to be at USA's as well with On, and at least ideally I'm going to do one more race down in at Portland Track Festival like 2-ish weeks from now, same week as USA's or not USA's, NCAA's, and running a 5K down there, hoping to run a fast time, get a US qualifying time standard, and yeah, so that's on the radar right now. Still putting in some great training and enjoying it. It's obviously I'd love to be. It's bittersweet not being at regionals right now and supporting and running with the guys, but it is cool to be a little bit removed and see them do their thing. So I'm excited to watch the guys at compete the rest of the weekend and hopefully in NCAA's. So there's just a lot of good things to look forward to.
Let me ask you this on a lighter note. I've asked some guys who will be competing against him, guys like Parker Wolf, etc.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who's competed against Nico for so many years now, but also seen his
Mm-hmm.
recent dominance, is he beatable? Do you think he's beatable?
um, I mean, anybody's beatable. Yeah, I think he is as unbeatable as he ever has been. So in that sense, it's looking great for him. I'm really stoked to be seeing the level of success he's been able to accumulate and get this past like year, because he's somebody who's had a lot of expectation on him, and it's tough to mitigate that and to manage that. And yeah, I mean, it is cool too. Like I have both of his brothers on the team, so I get like a little bit more insight or more proximity to how things are going for him and all that. But yeah, he's in a
The
really good
NCAA
spot
is
right now.
crazy, man. I mean, I said this to
Yeah.
Parker. I was like, we forget that Kai literally swept the field in a way in which hasn't been done in years last year in
Hmm.
Austin. He just won the 5K and 10K way too easily, and we forget that he's still in the NCAA. We've got Parker running 13:19, looking like he's out for a stroll in Chapel
Hmm.
Hill. It's just
Right.
ridiculous, the level of NCAA running. So if I was a
Oh,
betting
for
man,
sure.
I would pick Nico. But
Mm,
also, I think, guys, I think Nico wins 8 out of 10 times.
mm.
And it's just a question of, I
Hmm.
don't know. Even that might be a hot take. I think a lot of people take him 10 out of 10 times, but I think there you run the race 10 times. I think you'll come up with a Kai or a Parker who
Yeah.
runs away with
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And I can't wait to see the tactics. I think people are going to
Oh,
try to do stuff to throw him off, but it's so hard
totally.
because he's got 148 speed and he's got what, like 2650
Right.
strength. It's
No,
crazy.
he's kind of patched it all. You kids, that's a tough combo to beat. You're kind of locked up there. You can't out sprint, can't outrun. So I mean, yeah, it's incredible. That kind of range is tough to beat. So, but that being said, the sport is so ever changing. So it's hard to nail down a bet like 10 out of 10. I don't know. I would agree with you. We're looking at 8 out of 10. Um, he's looking very very scary, but there's a lot of great guys in NCAA. Can't forget about him. So it'll be good. I can't wait to watch though. It's gonna be ridiculous.
Let's close on this, Cole. Someone in my life started asking me this, and
Hmm.
I started asking my family this. I think it's a great question. I'll shift it towards month versus day. So
Mm-hmm.
it's May 23rd. So the month of May. And let's answer this from a non-running perspective, just because most of our
Okay.
conversation has been centered around running. What's something that has brought you joy this month? Non-running.
Oh,
Close this
not
out
running.
here.
Oh. spending time with teammates, friends. Like I, yeah, I think that's a big one for me. I've been, like I said, like I've been trying to be a little bit more present with my teammates, and just soak in all of these experiences before I'm headed off to who knows where. So, you know, you got the sun out, you got the guys playing some spike ball on the field. It's yeah, it brings a lot of joy in my life. I'm very grateful for it.
Who's the spike ball partner of choice, and who's your biggest competitor rival?
Oh, you know what? Kai and I were running the court, the I don't know what you call that, the
The
net. We were
grass.
running a net
Yeah, the net.
last weekend. We were playing. We had a recruit, so we were out on one of our fields, and yeah, Kai and I were kind of unbeatable. Great team chemistry. We just like knew exactly where each other was going to be. So yeah, he's a great partner. Let's see. Oh, Robert DiDonato. He's a very good sneaky player. A lot of nuance in his play. So you got to be watching out for the drop shots. Just like the light touch.
Sure, sure.
You can't
Those
forget
will
about
get
the
you, man.
touches. Yeah.
Those will get you. Well, Cole,
Those
really
are good.
appreciate the conversation. I always do.
Yeah,
I always get to the end of the conversation. I'm like, man, we ventured into many different deep subjects, and
yeah. Mm.
I always look forward to listening to these ones back because you pack them with so much wisdom. I feel like I need to be taking notes the whole time, but I
Oh,
can't
I
as the
don't even
guy
know what
asking
I'm saying half the
questions. So,
time. Yeah, it feels like I'm just talking sometimes, and I'm like, I don't know
hey,
what I'm
that's
about
what a
to say,
podcast is. That's what a
but yeah,
podcast is.
that's true. I was waffling. It's just all about waffling. So
There you
I
go.
feel like we accomplished that today.
Let's go, man. Appreciate the conversation. Keep crushing it, and we'll run it back sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dominic.